Thank you for being with us in the KDPG Sunday edition as we're talking finances and what's going on with the markets, not only here in the United States, but also globally. And we've got a fine panel discussing those issues for us this morning. Gentlemen, where do we stand right now with consumer confidence? Coming off a very strong retail season right now. And David, what do you think? And from a Pittsburgh standpoint, what are you seeing? What are you hearing in Pittsburgh? Does that retail strength translate to business strength across the board?
Well, retail strength is one thing around Christmas. There's another thing around what we used to call the January white sales. I don't think the economy is nearly as robust as everybody thinks it is. I think, as we've discussed before, that we're headed toward a market readjustment. Of course, we've also said that so many people have so little in their savings that may not affect them, but it surely will jolt their confidence going forward. And I worry about younger people not having jobs or not having the right jobs.
Lou, do you think that we're in a situation right now where it's a false sense of security in terms of that consumer confidence based on retail numbers?
No question. I mean, look at the malls. I was in 3 malls this past weekend, all right? Traffic's down. I mean, there's no question. They're buying more online, things like that.
The only people going to malls are people your age and mine.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that completely, but yeah, but there's certainly more people avoiding the malls these days and buying online, you know, the Amazon effect. But there's other competitors coming out there. The Baidu is coming, and some of the other ones, Tencent, they're all coming. They're competitors of Amazon.
You know, I disagree in one respect to what we're talking about right now, though, and that's the difference between the perception that people are okay versus the reality of whether they're okay. Right. The perception is that the wealth effect actually has gone up. They have stronger 401ks because of the market. Their housing values have gone up, and for those reasons, plus job security, there is a very tight labor market, as we talked about before. Very unlikely that they're going to be replaced. In fact, they could look for other job opportunities with higher pay if they chose to. So I think there's a sense of security right now in people to spend. Now, whether that is a reality to what they really have at home or not is another question entirely.
Hello. If their housing values have gone up, so has the replacement house that they were going to buy and with all that money they were going to make, right, that's gone up too. So that's a false asset.
I agree, and I think, in fact, what we're going to see is a pullback in home values given the changes that are coming in the Tax Act to the deductibility of interest. Right. It used to be up to $1 million of primary, secondary home interest deduction, now capped at $750. I think you're going to see a pullback in real estate values.
But as you know, Australia, Great Britain, and Canada do not have deductibility of home interest and have higher rates of home ownership than we have here. That's the biggest fraud ever perpetrated on the American people. You can thank the realtors for that, but it's simply not true.
Yeah. Right. How much does things like debt that students have at this point, with the rising cost of higher education, if students are coming out with $200,000 worth of debt by the time they're done at Carnegie Mellon or Pitt or Penn State, they've got a tremendous load there that they can't then start to save for a house. They can't then think about, so they're leasing longer. They're leasing more vehicles. We're seeing this with car buying habits right now too.
No question. I lease a vehicle all the time. I mean, you know, but it's the vehicle I bought. The last one went down by $8,000 over 3 years. So that's an economic strategy.
Decision on your part, right?
Yeah, but hold it, guys. It's cultural too. The same people who aren't buying cars don't want to buy cars.
That's true. A lot of people just buy used. All right,
or don't want to buy a car at all.
Well, yeah, in the big cities, that's probably true. Yes, but I'm from the suburbs, so I'm biased.
Mentality, right?
I'm biased,
right.
Yes.
Right.
But there's no question. I think the student loans, to justify the educational cost, you've got to have a high-paying job coming out of school, and it's certainly in your first 10 years, whereas it used to be you could maybe not necessarily have the most highest paying job and get away with it. Today it's a whole different story, coming out with these huge loans in
and
education.
The debt load that you have to service immediately after graduation, you may not have that income.
Absolutely,
right?
and you're going to end up with more people wanting relief programs. I see it in corporate America now. There's now benefits in some corporations. They're starting to talk about helping people out by, instead of matching their 401k, giving them some money towards their student
recruiting
loans.
Through that.
That's exactly right.
That's had important cultural changes as well. Talk to a parent who's just shelling out X number of dollars for tuition at Bucknell or at Penn State or at Pitt, and They don't want their child to be an English major anymore. Well, you used to go to college to be educated, not to be trained. That notion is completely gone, and that is changing and warping our culture as well.
And one of the things we talked of just a little while ago is about the impact on savings in this country and preparedness for retirement. Well, part of this is exactly what we're talking about now, because the people stepping in to help with those student loans are the parents at this point in their lives. They don't have the money, so they're having to save for retirement. They're paying toward those education costs.
Well, it causes them, forces them into the workforce more so.
That's right.
Going forward. So you have this kind of dilution of the workforce as time goes on, because it used to be people retired. That was our biggest problem when we talked to clients, was wanting to retire too early. We kept running into people, and Rick, I'm sure you've experienced, there's just no way economically you can retire at 55 and probably live till 90 or 95 and support that. You just haven't accumulated enough money. It's almost impossible.
An interesting statistic too that JP Morgan's Asset Management has put out about the questionnaire to people of, do you intend to work till 65 or longer? The response is about 65% and more say yes. The reality is that only about 23% can, because of health issues or other things that interfere.
But they're not able to work to 65 and beyond.
That's right.
Yeah. Interesting. David, you've mentioned this a couple of times, the lack of saving and how that concerns you on a personal basis. Yet corporations are rich with all this cash. Why the disconnect? Why are they not the same?
Well, savings for corporations, savings and investments are basically play the same role for corporations in the economy, but not for people. And so people who have not saved their money are facing exactly what these two gentlemen are saying. They're facing the notion of wanting to retire but not having the money to do so, having the illusion that they have more money than they have, or thinking that they might have a pension when in fact it was frozen 5 years ago. So I think there are all those factors contribute to, I think, what will be the biggest financial crisis of the rest of this decade, and that's the retirement crisis.
Interesting. Agreed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're seeing people just draw out too much money. They're spending too much in retirement. And, you know, people
and too much
find
before retirement.
Well, that's true too, because they haven't saved enough,
Right.
which is the other result. But you know, if you're in today's low return expectations, I mean, the numbers are absolutely low for the stock market the next 10 years based on where we're at. We're at the second highest valuation in history since 1881. We're at this point, we're at the precipice, okay? Bonds are really low. You're not going to get a lot off of that, maybe 2% if you're lucky. Stocks, maybe you're going to get 2%, and some people forecast a lot less than that. If you're taking out more than 2% today out of your portfolio in retirement to support your needs, you're going to be in trouble long term.
Yeah. You start talking about taking out or using the yield from your retirement?
Withdrawing.
Withdrawing capital.
Yeah.
People spend money.
Touching principle.
It's not about
Touching
yield.
principle.
It's not about yield.
Yeah.
It's about the fact they need to take out X dollars to spend. This is my lifestyle.
That's not there to grow anymore because that principle is
That's
Actually
right.
reduces growth.
Correct.
And part of this crisis that we're talking about that's going to have to be realized is the impact that this is going to have on the funding of Social Security. If you look at the 2014 numbers as to who is primarily dependent on Social Security as their primary source of retirement income, that has only gone up exponentially since then. So the dynamics that we're talking about all combined, as David says, I agree, there is a issue to be dealt with that's coming at us.
So then where do you go? I mean, is there a safe harbor? Is there somewhere that you can put your money in 2018 that says we will see a comfortable level of growth?
There's never a safe harbor. Okay, if you're CDs, you've underperformed in inflation for years. Okay, even at the low inflation rates we have, you're still underperforming inflation. Okay, then take the tax burden away from that, it's even worse.
Bonds.
So bonds are probably not going to be all that great going forward. Okay, just because rates are rising gradually. Things that are adjustable rate, like bank loans, might make sense if you're not in recessions. Floating rate mortgages, things like that might make sense, again, if you're not in a recession. The stock market, expectations are way too high.
Your best investment might be to pay your mortgage. Pay a little bit more on your mortgage.
To make certain then that the home
I
that
would
you're
argue
in,
that point.
Well, that way you're going to get 3 or 4%, where you might only get 2%.
But you have, right now, mortgages literally are at the most attractive rate in 5,000 years. Okay, and I've got a chart proving this. Okay, I got a chart for every job. But
it's a guaranteed 4%, 3%, 4% yield.
Well, it is, but
I think on the other hand too, though, Lou, I think that some of the things that people that I see regularly, as you do, who aren't doing the things they should be doing, for example, taking full advantage of the matching contribution they have available from a 401k where they work. They don't take
How about
that
putting
money.
$5,500 a person into your IRA?
I think that the issue we're talking about is learning in this country, which we never have, which is to pay ourselves first, not second. And to the spending habits that we have. You know, we are driving this economy, obviously, and always have 66+% by our spending, all right? The facts that we're talking about here right now don't belie continue to spend, but rather to save.
So guys, what percentage of people who have 401ks also invest in a IRA, and is that a wise move?
very few, actually. I mean, we don't see it. I mean, we have to force, well,
they think it's redundant? Is that what
they
it comes
think
down to?
there's some redundancy, but you know, if you're over 50, you can save
An extra,
$24,000 in
right.
401ks, and you can go to $6,500 in IRAs. They're just not taking advantage of that number, and I think the bulk of the number I just said was 30.
But nobody talks about IRAs.
30-some thousand
It's a pretty
dollars.
good investment, right?
It is, absolutely.
If you're not doing anything, yes, indeed, an IRA, whether you have a qualified plan at work or not, yes, an IRA makes a great deal of sense. But I think what we're
When was
talking
the last
about...
time you heard anybody talk about those?
Well, I think that the combination
80s.
we're talking about right now of,
Yeah.
as Lou says, you could put up to, let's say, the 18,500, which is going up in 2018 to 18.5, and you could put away the IRA. It's a question of having enough cash flow. So there is a balance in one's financial planning,
Spend
as it were,
less.
between have and have not, between the quality and the quantity of life. But I'm saying that what always we tend to go toward is spending other than saving.
Guys, one of my best friends is a guy named Jack Brennan, who for many years ran Vanguard. And I once asked him what the secret to financial success was. He says it's very easy. Live beneath your means.
That's right.
Spend less money
That's right.
than what you're bringing
That's
in.
right. He's
All
right.
Live beneath your means.
Taking a quick break right now. We'll wrap things up as we come right back with more of the KDPG Sunday Edition.